Okay, we're in section 1.5 that is looking at weighted averages. Um, we're just going to start off by talking about something you probably have experience with, which is just a straight average, or it's also called the mean, where you have a certain amount of numbers and you try to find the average, so you add them up and divide by the number of numbers you added up. For instance, if I was going to try to find the straight average of these 5 numbers, I would add them up and divide them by the number 5, and it comes out to be a decimal that I'm going to approximate. The mean for this would be 53.4. But what we're going to be looking at is finding a weighted average, and with a weighted average, you not necessarily do all of those numbers have the same weight. So a really good example for this is the college GPA, which stands for grade point average. The difference between calculating grades with a college GPA, we tend to do that in colleges and not as much in high schools, is that it's not on a level of 0 to 100%. It's on a level of 0 to 4.0. So this is the best grade you can get for GPA, and this is the best grade that you can get if we're looking at percent. So for me, if someone tells me I got a 77% on an exam, I can immediately relate that to how well I did. But if somebody said to me I got a 2.9, I have a very difficult time processing that really quickly. So it's nice to be able to know how to go backwards and forwards from percent to GPA. One thing I ask myself is, what can I do to the number 4 to make it 100? What would I manipulate it with? And hopefully you're thinking, well, if you multiply 4 by 25, then you get 100%. This works. So for instance, if I have a 3.0 and I want to change that to a percentage, I would multiply it by 25. A 3.0 is equivalent to 75%. This also works going backwards. If you were to get an 84% and you wanted to convert that back to the GPA method, then you would just need to divide that by 25. So if I take 84 and divide it by 25, that's a 3.4. This is always interesting. I think one of the funniest things that I ever see on Facebook is a person that at one time I knew as a student getting on Facebook and bragging about having a GPA of 2.5, not knowing that a 2.5 is the same thing as a 62 average. And that's not something you would probably get on Facebook and brag about. But if you don't understand GPA, I could see how you probably would. Okay, so if you're taking a full load of classes, I'm going to make a table where we are looking at the classes, the number of credits, and what the grade is that you got in that class. For instance, if you had a math class, it might be 4 credits. Gym tends to be 1 credit. An English class tends to be 3 credits. And usually your science classes with a lab are worth 4 credits. I'm also going to assign a grade to each of these. And I can tell you right now, if I could assign myself a grade, and I said to myself, the highest grade, I hope, is in which one of these classes? I'm hoping that my highest grades are in the 4 credit classes because those have a higher weight when it comes to my average. I'd love my chemistry grade to be a 4.0, and if I have a low grade, like 2.2, I would love that to be my gym, although I'm not going to make it my gym. I'm actually going to make it my English. I'll get a 4.0 in my gym class and 3.5 in math. And the question here is, what is my grade point average? Altogether, I'm taking 4, 8, 9, 13 credits. That means I'm full-time because 12 plus credits is full-time. And so I need to figure out of these credits, is it 13, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11? Oh my goodness gracious, it's 12. I need to figure out, with these 12 credits of classes that I'm taking, what my weighted average is. I know that 4 out of 12 of my credits go with a grade of 3.5. And I know that 1 out of 12 of my credits is going to go to a 4.0. I know that 3 out of 12 of my credits is going to go to a 2.2. And then I'm going to add to that the last part, which is another 4 out of 12 are going to be assigned to 4.0. when I am done setting up my formula, I should have fractions that when added together should make a 12 out of 12. I should be accounting for 12 credits out of the 12 credits that I'm taking. This is really easy to put in a TI-83 calculator. If you are going to use the TI-83, this is how I would write it in. I would do 4 divided by 12. I would do the open and close parentheses. This is how you put a fraction in the TI-83 or 84. You use the division symbol. I'm already trying to use a fraction symbol. And you can do this in one fell swoop. You just have to make sure that all those parentheses are there so your calculator knows where there are fractions and where there are not fractions, because the calculator can misconstrue what you're saying. And so if I put this in my calculator and I add it all up and simplify, the GPA for that semester is a 3.38. If you were a person that was at a school that rounded it to the nearest tenth, it's a 3.4. You're going to look at questions like this in my math lab, and the way that they do it in my math lab is a little bit funny. So I wanted to make sure that we had an example on here like what you would see in my math lab so you weren't confused about what they were asking you. This question says, suppose you took 15 credit hours and you earn an A- in English, which is 3 credit hours. So this is, of course, English. The letter grade is an A-. The numerical equivalence of an A- is a 3.67, and it's 3 credit hours. I'm going to give you a moment. I want you to pause the video and then fill in the other classes and then unpause it and come back to me. Here is my completed table. If I add up all of the credit hours, there's 15 credit hours altogether. The weight of this is the fraction. 3 out of 15, 4 out of 15, 3 out of 15, 2 out of 15, and 3 out of 15. But what they want is the weight times the numerical equivalent, which is the fraction times the GPA for each of the class. Now I'm leaving space because in here they want me to put the decimal version of whatever that is. So I'm just going to fill this in. Okay. This is what I'm putting in my calculator. And what that looks like as decimals is 0.734, 0.8, 0.466. I'm the world's fastest calculator person. That's why I've got these so quick. It couldn't be because I have a copy of the notes in front of me. If you add them all up, the GPA for that semester would be 2.98. If your school is the type of school that will give it to you rounded the nearest tenth, this would be a 3.0. Okay. Be aware on your homework, you might get a question that looks like this, that gives you all of this information and then tells you in the small print that here is all of the stuff, this is your GPA, but what happens if they take history out because you dropped history? If you were to have a question like that, you would need to redo all these calculations, because if you take a class out, you're changing all the weights from 15 down to 12. So be aware of that. That could be a thing. Read all the fine print, all that lovely stuff. Okay. We're in 1.6, and we're talking about different types of measure, absolute measure versus relative measure. So this is how I'm going to describe it to you. If I come to you and I ask you, Jenna made 10 shots when she was shooting a basketball. Is she a good player? What would you say, Carly? Is she a good player? Yeah. She made 10 shots. Yeah. Yeah? You think she's a good player, Mitchell? No? No. What about you, Luke? Jenna made 10 shots. Not this Jenna, a Jenna you don't know. She made 10 shots.
Out of how many?
Oh, out of how many? 10 shots out of 20.
No.
10 shots out of 100?
No, heck no.
10 shots out of 11.
Yes.
Okay. This is what we're talking about. Absolute measure is when you are just counting, and that was where I was saying Jenna made 10 shots. Nothing wrong with this, I guess, for certain things, but the problem is you can't answer the question, is Jenna good at basketball? Because this is not relating it to anything. So when I was asking, is Jenna good at basketball, people started to ask, well, how many shots did she take? So that they can compare it to something and decide whether or not they think she's good at basketball or not. I know there are other variables that we would have to take into consideration, but we'll just pretend this is from the foul line. So relative measure means counting and comparing. And I'm going to, again, use the example. Jenna made 10 out of 11 shots. Okay, so we have a bunch of examples here of sentences that we are going to have to decide if it's absolute measure, where you're just counting, or relative measure, where you are counting and comparing. So the first one says, I got 7 answers wrong. Do you guys know if this is absolute or relative? Absolute, right? 7 answers wrong. We don't know how many answers they did altogether. How about this? I guessed on 4 answers.
What was that other option?
It's either absolute or relative. Absolute is just counting, and relative is counting and comparing. I guessed on 4 answers. Absolute. 2/3 of the class failed. Relative. We know that's probably not a great teacher. I don't know. I saved $10. Absolute. I saved 40%. Relative, because 40% is a comparison. A percentage is a comparison, right? 40 out of 100? It's a comparison. 4 out of 5 students worked to help pay tuition. Relative. Johnny Damon's batting average in 2005, his final year with the Red Sox, was .316. Relative. You can tell if he's good or bad using that, because that is a measure of how many he is hitting compared to how many he is standing there swinging at, right? Okay. I don't really know. I'm trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Ichiro Suzuki got 262 hits in 2004. Absolute. We're just counting. In 2012, the U.S. Census Bureau estimated that 53 million members of the U.S. population were Hispanic. Relative. What are we comparing it to? Oh, absolute. How about this one? In 2012, the U.S. Census Bureau indicated that 17% of the nation's population was Hispanic. Relative. This one is relative because we're using a percentage. Anytime it's a percentage, it's a comparison, and it's relative. Okay, I'm going to stop this video and start the next video at ratio.